You hear the word boundaries get thrown around a lot in recovery circles, but what does it actually mean? And more importantly, why do you need to understand it? We're going to dig into boundaries today, and our guests will share some examples of boundaries they've had to set in their own lives, as well as why it's been important for their recovery journeys.
Welcome to Through the Glass Recovery Podcast, where we believe that connection is the opposite of addiction, vulnerability is the antidote to shame, and that recovery isn't just rewarding, but it's also a lot of fun. We're your hosts, Steve and Julie. Listen as we get together with friends to shed light on the hard things, talk about the other side of addiction, and how we create a life so full, there's no space left for alcohol.
Before we get started, we just want to let you know that we are looking for future podcast guests. If you would like the opportunity to share a part of your journey, get in touch with us and let's chat. You can email us at throughtheglassrecovery@gmail.com. We believe that every single story deserves to be shared.
Let her rip.
Hey everyone, welcome. It's nice to meet you all. So I'm kind of excited. We're outnumbered by Canadians today. We have 3 Canadians here.
There's a person for everything.
It does not happen very often, so super cool. And then we also have 3 guests that we've never had before, so I'm really excited about some new perspective and some new stories and just to meet some new people. So we are going to start with our introductions, and Sean, I'll have you go first.
Hello, everyone. Really excited to be here and talk about our topic tonight. And I have been sober since January 2021. So I'm coming up on my 1,000th day this coming weekend, the end of September.
Awesome.
And it's past, it's had its share. We'll get into that. But
Yeah.
I spent the first year developing and I wrote my book, my memoir called Going Dry, My Path to Overcoming Habitual Drinking, and very much about the process of going sober.
Really cool.
Really cool. Really, really neat. So we will definitely include a link to that in our show notes so everybody can check that out and follow along with you in the rest of your story. And next we'll go with Nicole.
Hi, I'm Canadian. I'm Nicole. Incidentally, I'm not allowed in the States. So it's kind of funny that I'm on the show and I'm not allowed in the US. But I've done a couple of podcasts, so I kind of sneak in that way. I've been in recovery for 5 years today.
Yes, congratulations.
Today is kind of a big deal for me.
It's a huge deal.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Congrats.
kind of a big deal for me. This is actually my second kick at the can, kind of. I mean, there had been points in my life where I tried to clean up, but it just wasn't happening. And the first time I was in recovery for 33 months, and then I went back out for 3 or 4 months and got some insight, did some more research. And yeah, so my Instagram page, I don't have a book or anything like that, but I have committed my Instagram page to my recovery journey. And I basically started that page when I was coming off of my relapse. And it's been a really big deal for me just because I've met so many amazing and cool people with all different perspectives from all over the world. And I've got some really good friends on Instagram that I've met from all over the world. And, people that work different types of programs. And I'm really open to learning about other people's recovery and how they run their program and how they stay clean and what works for them. Because, humanity is all very different and we're all really different people. And I think that it's important that we respect each other's journey. And so it's been really great for me because it's almost like traveling sometimes. I talk to probably 50 people a day and often they live at all sorts of places. And so I love that. And yeah, I'm in Saskatchewan right now. I'm here for work. So
Amazing.
Super cool. Well,
Awesome.
huge congratulations on 5 years. That's amazing. I'm so excited that we get to celebrate that with you. Thank you for being here with us. And yeah, Nicole's Instagram has all kinds of super cool and inspiring content. I have followed you for a while. So definitely check that out. And again, link in the show notes. Yeah, super cool to meet you. And then last but not least, we have Richard.
Well, thank you for having me. And I'm not Canadian. I just want to say that.
Too bad for you.
I come and you've invited me, and I appreciate it. RN for 35 years, semi-retired, but right now I run a coaching service for the family units of young adults in the drug, alcohol, and drug recovery, and also incarceration. And it basically came from my years as a nurse. I spent many years as a correctional nurse and then a substance abuse nurse, and I found that they were pretty much the same thing. In helping those, I realized that we had to take certain avenues for those who were compromised socially. And so I kind of run this service with families who were compromised socially and help them with their recovery and help them work with guys like you and increase their knowledge of the medical system so that they can get more power out of that, and also help them mold a support network because it helped them with the guilt and shame aspect of it. So that's what Second Starts does, my company. And I always have to say, number two, NDSTARTS.com. And this basically works with families of compromised young adults in recovery.
Really, really cool.
Amazing. Yeah, that is some really inspiring work that you do. I think that's really great. Super excited to have you here also. So the word boundaries gets thrown around a lot in conversations about recovery, and for good reason. Setting boundaries is super important if we want to stay sober for the long term, but I think there can be confusion around what that actually means. So we would love to hear what that has looked like in your life. What boundaries have you had to set, and how did that go? And why are they important to you and your recovery?
Done.
What you got, guys? Anybody can go first.
I feel like we should break that down a little bit. That's a lot.
Whatever.
I can say this. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'll go ahead.
Boundaries for me, I had to realize that I needed to set boundaries. I had to realize what it was, but also that, and get the confidence to establish them. So boundaries for me were very confusing in the beginning because I didn't realize how much I had control of them, and how, like, with my upbringing and just the process that got me where I was, there was a routine and a habit around drinking and the way I carried it and everything I did. So boundaries to not do something I was so used to doing was such a difficult transition. So to set those rules or to have those limits to share with other people, I had to get around it myself first. And that was the most difficult part.
For sure. Setting boundaries with ourselves, I think, is huge, right?
Yes.
And understanding what those boundaries need to be. Yeah, I think that's where it all starts. Everything starts inside of us, right? And then we start spreading it around in our lives after that.
Yes. I found that in dealing with people, I tried to explain to them that boundaries are, of course, difficult because we as human beings, boundaries are going to be difficult. So the difficulty that you have with boundaries, people who are crossing your boundaries, they're having the same difficulty also. I tried to listen and tell them and tell myself also, because we're all in that business, that to do the heavy lifting of helping with boundaries, to work on and put most of your effort into your internal boundaries is probably the best way to go. Get the heavy lifting done. If you can set your own priorities, and I wouldn't say stone, but at least very thick mud, to where you're stubborn about it and your own boundaries, that helps you so much with those things and people that are looking to cross your boundaries. So strengthening your internal boundaries is probably where you should put 65% of your effort. I'd say, strengthening your own internal boundaries, and your own sense of self-agency and ownership is where you need to point most of your efforts. It's going to be a hard road to go anyway. So at least put your work and your effort into the area that does you the most good. That's usually what we try to do, help out. So
you said ownership right there. And I think that Ownership's one of the hardest parts of recovery, right? Because ownership means you have to be honest with yourself, and that is freaking painful and uncomfortable, and it doesn't feel good. And you have to acknowledge the things that you've done and the things you need to stop doing, and you need to realize that it's all in your control. And yeah, I mean, all of that has to happen in order to even recognize the boundaries that have to be set. You have to have like this major willingness to be honest with yourself. That is really uncomfortable and really difficult.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, I grew up in a family in Saskatchewan, which is, Saskatchewan's a province where there's this really strong drinking culture. You basically grow up, often your family drinks, your neighbors drink, everybody drinks, and everybody hangs out together and drinks. And like, that's just how I grew up. And so I grew up in an environment where, although my family worked really hard and they were ranchers and they all had nice trucks and nice houses and all of that sort of situation, drinking was just something that you did every day, like after work, on the weekend. I think I started drinking probably every weekend when I was 12 and continued on from there. There wasn't any boundaries in my family around what sorts of things kids should or shouldn't be doing, because we kind of just all ran wild, and that was fine as long as you were home in bed at a specific time. And I learned a lot of my behaviors from that environment, and I honestly did not even have any idea what a boundary was until I came into recovery. And not just my own boundaries, but other people's boundaries, and understanding, relationships and how boundaries are important so that you don't end up in toxic situations or compromising what's good for you or what's good for your family. So I just really had no idea what that even meant. So.
It's funny when we talk about boundaries, and I think we're all nodding our heads. Like, I didn't know what a boundary was until I got into recovery. Like, it was something new and fancy, but literally it starts with no, right? Like, no for myself. We're talking about boundaries, and one of the first things that comes to mind is no is a complete sentence. It's literally like no, period, done, end of sentence. We're good. This starts with you. It starts with me. No, I'm not going to drink now. There's my first boundary. Now, what do I need to set around that so I can maintain the I'm not going to drink anymore? And then what do I have that's around me that is infiltrating, that serves me and doesn't serve me? What's infiltrating that safe space that I'm starting to create? When something comes into that safe space, I get a chance. This is where my control comes in. We talk about control because when I didn't have any control over I didn't think I had control over anything. I fought for control over stuff that I couldn't control anyways. But now infiltrating my space, what do I do with that? Something is now here, and I'm uncomfortable, and it's not right for me, and it's not going to serve me. How do I create a boundary or communicate that boundary properly so it's heard? And if it isn't heard, that's fine. I'm going to have to repeat that again. And finding the courage to actually communicate that once I've figured it out is terrifying. There's no way. This is me standing up for myself. That's what essentially a boundary feels like, is I'm standing up for me, and I am going to now teach this person how to treat me in a completely different way, because that's not what they're used to.
Right.
And the problem is, if you come from a toxic family system that doesn't understand that at all, there's all these other sort of collateral issues of like gaslighting and, basically invalidating what you're trying to do, because they remain in that toxic system. And, I don't know if this has been your experience, but people that are still in active use, they want you in active use with them.
Yes.
It makes them feel better about the fact.
Yeah. This is why I surrounded myself with other people that drank a lot too.
Yes.
Right? It made me feel
right.
Go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was my experience too. It was toxic family environment, but also the friend circles I had, and we don't accept boundaries until recovery, but the people around us aren't in the same position as we are. They're not going through the same thing. So not only are we learning about boundaries, but then we got to convince the people around us that we mean it this time, or that we don't want this thing anymore, or that maybe we're still going to try to hang on to some of the same friend groups and stay in that same environment, but not participate in what's going on. To convince the people around me that I wasn't the same person I was before I made the commitment was such a barrier. It was difficult.
Yeah, well, and you have to reteach people how to treat you, right? So, I mean, with my family, I've let them treat me a certain way for a really, really long time. So then when I waltz in and I'm like, here is my boundary, they like laugh at it, right? There is no reason for them to take that seriously. I think the closer people are to us and the more comfortable they are with us and the more like intertwined our lives are, the longer it takes for them to understand, I really mean this and we're not going to do this anymore. And I think to some extent it takes patience. You might have to repeat the same thing multiple times. But then I think at some point too, you just kind of have to call it. Be like, okay, clearly you're not going to learn. And so I think, I'm going to need to create some distance in this relationship now. And that is like stupid, painful to me. Because a lot of times these are people that you're close to and you love and you want so bad to have like this healthy relationship with them. And they just can't. Like going through that right now. And it is tearing my heart out because the people that I would love to have a healthy relationship with just aren't capable. And so like I'm having to create that distance and start that disconnection. But that's how it works, right? And it's painful. It takes a lot of courage to show up and state the boundaries and to state what it is that you're needing. And it also takes a lot of courage to follow through with the consequences when they've let you know they're not willing to, accept your boundary.
Mm-hmm. In the beginning, when I was trying to figure it out, like my younger brother was asking me, because I turned a beer down, where my coin is. Did you not get your coin yet? And it was a jab because I wasn't willing to participate in even something as simple to him. I wasn't what I wanted. So it was just not, it was very uncomfortable.
I think that in the recovery situations that I see the people, and mostly I'm dealing with the younger people, it's especially hard for them because they haven't learned, there's a lot of social things they just haven't had a chance to learn anyway. And then with that extra family pressure, they literally have no ideas how to protect their boundaries, literally. So we find that the best thing for the younger people, I think it would go even for the older people, is to sort of, it's like getting in shape, lifting your chops on small boundary things, getting yourself acclimated to the very basics of taking care of yourself and practicing that and staying with it because they need a little bit more strength to deal with the big things. Because like what you guys are talking about, that's the big stuff. When your own family members, walk up to you and hurt you to your face. And I tell them all the time, I say, listen, this is going to happen. It's our human nature. It's our human condition. Okay. The best way for you to prepare for it is to start with your own internal boundaries. Again, I said that before, but it's the truth, and practice with it and stay with it. Because the harder times, like what you guys are talking about, they're coming. No one is pretty much ever going to allow you to live like that. And when it goes away, it will not be because others stop. It will be because you have become strengthened and immune from the inside. They're not going to stop. It's a matter of you building it up. And it's very difficult. And it will remain difficult. Just, understand that it will remain difficult. But once you strengthen yourself, and that takes work and it takes a little effort, it takes a little bit of, repetition. It's not just going to come. People say, well, set your boundary to them. That's way easier said than done. There's pain that goes with that. There's a lot of things that go with that. And I don't have to tell you. So it takes practice to set boundaries. Practice. Start with the little things, work your way up, and just stay at it.
It takes practice just figuring out how to form the words and form the sentence to create, just to communicate the boundary to begin with.
Right.
And then you fail at that. And I've failed at that miserably a whole bunch of times. And then I get upset because I'm like, how do you not understand this? Because I'm not really communicating it properly either. Then I haven't, said, okay, here's the consequence to the boundary once it gets crossed. Because it's my responsibility to communicate. This is here's my boundary. This is what's going to happen if it gets crossed. And then it's also my responsibility to enforce that once that gets crossed. So there's it's like the whole 3 steps that happens, and it takes courage to do that. And I have to be willing to suck at it because I was, and I did. And then on top of that, here's a fun one. How does it feel when someone sets a boundary on you? Doesn't feel too good, does it?
Very important point you just made.
Because we're setting boundaries. Somebody's setting boundaries for me, and because somebody else is teaching me how to treat them, because I don't know, and that's uncomfortable. That hurts. That stings. It's like, wait a minute, now I'm not getting what I want from you.
Yes.
I actually don't have a problem with that. Like,
No?
I like clarity, and I like, responsibility and accountability and those conversations where, because I respect other people, and I want to have like an adult relationship where we're respecting each other and the relationship serves both of us. Like, there's reciprocity.
Yeah.
I think boundaries are important in recovery, but also in creating those relationships that you're bringing into your life. Like, I spent a lot of time by myself in the last 5 years. When I came off my last relapse, I was in a relationship, and that's kind of what led me to go back out. And I recognized that it was those loose boundaries and those relationships that were bad for me that I kept picking over and over the same person in different bodies, and loose boundaries with them and loose boundaries with myself. And that's how I kept relapsing or, being involved in those situations. And so then I was like, okay, I need to spend some time as a single woman and try to figure out what a healthy relationship looks like. And not only have boundaries for myself, but respect other people's boundaries also, because I was toxic as F. And I've just moved back to Saskatchewan. I was living in BC, and my recovery community there is great. And I've never used there, and everybody in the rooms only know me as I am right now. And I moved back to Saskatchewan, where the last time I was here before the move, I was in handcuffs. So you can imagine how much respect for boundaries I had. And my brother now lives directly across the street from me, and he wanted nothing to do with me because people would see me coming and they'd be like, oh God, here comes Nicole. It's not good, because I was a loose cannon. I was always doing something crazy because I had no boundaries and didn't know what they meant. And I was toxic, and I think I had ego issues and all sorts of fun things. And since I've moved back to Saskatchewan, my relationship with my brother is like exponentially better. And every day I live in so much gratitude that he was able to let me know what his boundaries were, because he was still carrying some trauma from when we were kids, because we both went through a lot of really terrible things with a family that, commonly used. And our dad was a drug addict, and, and so I think that when you're talking about it stinging or whatever, if you're acting up, it should sting a little bit.
Well, there's the thing is I didn't know how to take things, not to take things personally.
Personally.
Right? So, I mean, I'm a hell of a lot better at it now, but in early recovery, when someone set a boundary on me, I was like, what the heck is wrong? Like, I took it personally because I didn't know. I literally hadn't grown up, matured enough to understand that boundary isn't about me at all. It's about, it might be about how I'm acting or what that may be or what my expectation is of that person. But maybe that's being set because that's not an expectation that can be met, and or something along those lines. And that means there's something that I need to understand.
Yeah.
It means that it's not about, I took it personally. I took a lot of things personally. I was really good at that when I was drinking, and I was still really good at that when I quit, because that was how I learned to like live, and it was unhealthy. And really relearning the healthy part, how to accept those boundaries and how to set them myself was just.
Well, for me, it was like boundaries felt like rejection and boundaries felt like criticism. And me being a perpetual people pleaser with virtually no self-worth, rejection and criticism were horribly painful. And so the more that I've grown in recovery, I actually have self-worth now. And I understand that criticism isn't always bad, and that I can grow, and that's okay. And that boundaries aren't rejection. It's basically someone communicating their needs to you and if someone works up the courage to share a boundary with you, they really care about you. If they didn't care about you, they would just be like, fuck off, and they would leave, right?
This is true.
But
This is Nicole. Peace.
Yeah, like peace out. This is not worth the emotional energy. But if they're setting a boundary, they're really working up the courage and putting a lot of emotional energy into holding on to that relationship. And I think that's something we really need to respect. I'm with Steve, where I've never handled boundaries set very well, but I like hearing Nicole talk about it that way, because there's just, obviously I still have some growing to do. But I just think it's really powerful, because I think it is, and in a way, it's a gift from that person that they're willing to share that with you.
Good point.
I think it's in development that you learn how to accept it more, for sure. I agree with kind of the way everybody's going with this. There's two different ways I would have handled this. The way now, where I want, like Nicole said, I want to know someone's boundaries so that I know, how to best interact with them. But an old me, like boundaries, they didn't exist. I was trying to be the best host. I was trying to be the best friend. I was trying to, just get people involved. And I was drinking. I wanted other people around me too. And their boundaries weren't as important, or I wasn't as aware of them because I wasn't thinking about it. It was just the nature of what we were doing, or the environment, that just wanted to make sure everybody was involved.
I think the whole self-will thing, that's part of it as well. And I don't know who's in a 12-step program or who's not in a 12-step program, but that self-will piece is, I think, really linked to that as well. You want to manipulate situations, or impose what you want on situations, or you want things to go exactly how you want them to go, because when you're in active addiction or you're not healed, it's about you. It's only about you. You don't really care what other people want or what their boundaries are, because that isn't getting you farther to where you want to be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The interesting part is when you start setting boundaries and you start accepting boundaries, you get a lot closer to where you want to be than you ever were before. You get a lot closer to peace, inner peace. You get a lot closer to the friends that are around you, because you're gonna end up having a conversation that probably includes a little bit of vulnerability, a little bit of personal touch, and then you're going to learn about them and they're going to learn about you, and then that grows the relationship, which is funny, because trying to grow a relationship without boundaries because you don't understand what they are, it's just like jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I like what Richard, so I'm thinking about Richard and working with youth and working with families and teaching youth to set a boundary. And if I had been taught in my youth what the word boundary meant, my whole life would be different. It would be incredible. So I just think that's amazing what you're doing.
I think that it's, for me, when I came up with this thought while I was in the correctional facility, I had no intention on moving in this direction. I became a jail nurse by pure accident anyway. I didn't even mean to do that. kind of just got drafted into it from my county service. But I noticed the phenomenon of the young people who would come to the jail, and I would see them the first time, and there was such fear and this, confusion in their eyes. And at that time, at that moment, they were willing to do anything you asked them to do to get better, and go into recovery or whatever. The problem is that if there's no intervention at that time, you see them the second time, and they're a little bit more jaded and a little less receptive. Then you see them the third time, and by the time I see them the fourth or fifth time, they're not paying any attention. When I coupled that with the fact that I took phone calls from these people's parents all the time, and the grief and the pain involved here is so high, you say, well, you got to do something. Now, once you actually get the family unit together, then all the things that you talked about show up right away. Lack of boundaries, the guilt shaming, whether on purpose or by accident.
Unintentional, yeah.
Yes, and then you realize that if you could do something to intervene and start getting some of these principles in place between the ages of, 16 to 23 to 24 in that area, it helps so much when a young person has some of these realizations about boundaries, as we've been talking about, and simple things like that, to where now they get a head start on it. And I like to think that we could reduce the number of now 30, 35, and 40-year-olds with this issue. The problem is that if it doesn't get, I noticed that if it doesn't get stopped before about the age of 25, 26, when a person starts to believe that they're an adult, you got a downhill roller coaster that's got a lot of power behind it now. And now you marry that with a substance, and it's an out of control train. So we really do try to work with the families to help them understand what is going on here, what you can do to help. Because a lot of times the family histories, they don't really understand the damage that they're doing. They really don't. Most of the time it is not intentional.
No.
Yeah.
Most of the time it is not. But
I was in therapy. I was in therapy as a teenager. I went through my depressive stuff as a teen. I think that's when some of my mental health issues really started. And I learned some stuff, but my family never learned any of that stuff, right? And how do you take that as a 16-year-old to your parents and be like, this is what I need? And so it just never happened. And I think that's another important thing. So many of us in recovery are, in a way, really blessed to be learning all of these healthy ways to function, emotionally healthy adults. I would never, if I didn't first get addicted to alcohol and then get sober, I would never have become an emotionally healthy adult. I would still be out there, it would be terrible. But then we also have this gift.
It would be terrible.
It would. Well, right. I was a freaking disaster. Even before I was an alcoholic, I was a disaster. So it is a gift to me to get sober and to be able to grow and learn all of these things. But then we also have the power of sharing that gift with the people in our lives, like with our children or with our families, and not everybody's going to be receptive, but at least we're old enough now and we have hopefully the communication skills and the wherewithal to try. And I think that is really powerful. We don't have to just keep this stuff in the recovery community, right? We get to share this stuff. It's generational. My parents would never know what the word boundary meant if I said it to them.
Yeah.
But we can start sharing.
My children, none of them drink. My son smokes a bit of weed. He's 20. But it's nothing like how it was when I was growing up or, other people in my family. My mom, there's no boundaries. And I don't think she will ever have boundaries. She's a boomer. She's got the emotional intelligence of a rock. I was hoping when we were living together that maybe it might wear off on her a little bit. And we would have these really great conversations about these things exactly. And then the next day it would be the same shit. But it's because she's drinking, right? And so somebody that isn't healthy, that isn't ready to accept that they might have a problem and really kind of nasty and passive aggressive and all these resentments and unverbalized expectations that turn into resentments. And it was really important for me with my children that that communication style didn't go for another generation. And like when I came into recovery, there was a lot of things that I had done when I was using that really harmed my children. My children ended up in care, and my children lived with their grandparents, and I went to prison and all of those pieces. And so there was a lot of healing to do. And it was really important to me that I was open to having those really difficult conversations, but I let them lead it, right? And the boundary issue, I've made sure that they understand what that means and why you have to appreciate what's acceptable or not acceptable to other people. My mom, I'm afraid we're just going to have to go generational down.
Yeah. And to be fair, it is not only parents who drink, because my parents don't drink and they still have the emotional intelligence of a rock. So
Richard isn't like my mom.
I mean, God love him.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're spot on with that.
I just want to add to the generational thing too. Part of my journey when I was younger, I'm also Ontario, I didn't mention that earlier, Canada, but we grew up and it was like, it was a rite of passage once you reached a certain point. Like I mixed, my brothers and I have two younger brothers, and we knew how to mix drinks perfectly when we were like 8 years old. So it was fun, right? It was this cool thing you could help your parents with, because you were going to grab beers from the cooler, but like to come back with a mixed drink, right? That was a huge deal. And then, you know, we would have this game where we would count up all the beer cans, crush them, and put them back in the bag with the number on the bag. And then they'd go back to the store for the return credit and buy more. Like there was so many things at such a young age that was like a game to us as young kids. And that set me up because that was such a fun example. Like how can this be such a bad thing if we're playing this cool game where we're counting the cans and mixing these cool colored drinks and being so helpful? And then, you know, I started to reach a point when I decided to make changes, that because I've got 3 young kids, and I was seeing some of that transition. I was realizing that was not good behavior. That wasn't a good idea. I was repeating that same generational pattern that we talk about with my own kids, and then wondering why I felt so miserable about it. And I'm not planning on having the same rite of passage, because it definitely didn't work for me.
I think that one of the things that I try to tell the young people and the parents when we get them together is that, unfortunately, although we're in a recovery situation, the things that we are talking about actually should be taught to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I would really, the program that we run is basically, even though I use it for recovery, because that's my background, people in distress who need recovery, that's the background that I've worked in.
Yeah.
So that's why I aim it at. But actually, I would like to see it done for every 17 or 18-year-old that looks left or right the wrong way, and start it right then.
Needs to be a course in school.
It definitely is, because we can nail down some of these really simple issues. Actually, they're simple before they get bad.
Mm-hmm.
Once they get bad, they're not simple anymore. But they are simple before they get bad. And if we could work on some of those things. But unfortunately, human nature is that we don't want to move on things until we feel pain.
Yeah.
But by the time you feel pain, you're already injured.
It's so true. It's one of the things I actually been like, I recognize, I'm like, why do I have to make this hurt so much before I actually change something?
Yeah.
Right. And it's true. I'm like, wow, I need to do something. I need to actually do something about that. Like, I know I need to change it. And if I don't do anything, it's going to hurt really bad. And then I'm going to be back in this same place again. And I've repeated that over and over again until I started learning my lesson. It's just like any other lesson. I feel like I have to learn it the hard way.
I think that's an alcoholic thing. We just really like to learn lessons the hard way.
If you don't learn it the hard way, and if you don't do it really good and just dive right in, go 100% full bore, then you're probably not doing it right.
Right.
avoidance piece. It's the avoidance piece. You know, we use
Yeah.
to avoid
Yeah.
avoid negative emotions. We use to escape. It's like a little holiday from your brain, but
Yeah.
but it's not.
And like Richard said, with just the way we get once we reach a certain age, that's just like that was who I was. That's exactly to Richard's point. I was where I was at. I was coasting through my days and maintaining the lifestyle I had, and wasn't going to change anything because I was an adult now, and you can do this when you're an adult. You don't have to worry about it. You just carry on with your life, and then you reach a point where you don't want to do that anymore, or you have to change.
Yeah, flexibility with young people is the only thing that sometimes saves their lives in their future, that they still have that little bit of flexibility they could use. They have a lack of experience, but they also have flexibility too. We try to capitalize on that flexibility because it's not going to last. The flexibility part is not going to last.
Right.
You don't catch it within a certain age. It's not impossible, but it just gets to be a much harder task to change mindsets once you get past a certain age. Then you're into a lot of other things, and your level up, your need for therapy increases exponentially once you get past a certain age.
Well, yeah, that's us, right?
Yeah.
That's that's the other four of us that are sitting here. We didn't figure this stuff out until, I was 40, almost 40, when I started even understanding any of this stuff. That's exactly what you're talking about. And it's really hard to learn this stuff.
I achieved a level of independence that didn't really require me to grow emotionally anymore. And I think that was what I was getting out of what you were saying there, Richard. Like there's that level of you grow up a little bit, and there's a level of independence, and then I got stubborn as hell.
Yeah.
And then after that, I'm just not listening anymore because the problem isn't me, it's everyone else. And
Right.
As soon as that was everyone else's problem, I don't have to do anything. I don't have to do any of the work. It's not a requirement for me. But you talk about, and I'm going to wrap this up now. Richard, you talked about, I'm going to grab onto this because this, I think, would be absolutely amazing if that was like emotional health was a program that was put in schools. And I'm not just saying like one class in one semester. You do that for like 4 years, every semester, every time, and you make that a part of the conversation so you learn how to actually communicate properly. I've spent the past 2.5 years trying to learn how to have a healthy emotional response to what life throws at me.
Yes.
That's a major part of what recovery has looked like for me. And I seeing heads nodding all over the place here with Sean, Julie, Nicole, and you, Richard. That is the meat and potatoes of it for me. Nicole, before I go any further, congratulations on 5 years. That is absolutely incredible.
Yes, congratulations.
Congrats. That's great.
Thank you.
Absolutely incredible. Thank you for spending it with us.
Yeah, I hide, so it was easy, and I was quite happy to do it. My sponsor's back in BC. Nobody's taking me for dinner. It's okay.
Thank you for spending it with us.
No, I appreciate. I think it was good. It was really good.
Yeah, I love it. The special, 5 years, and you get to celebrate it with a podcast recording and joining us in this awesome conversation.
Sure. Yeah.
We teach people how to treat us. A lot of it was part of that conversation where setting boundaries starts with me and learning about myself. Talked a little bit about self-agency and ownership, and they kind of go hand in hand. Once you start taking ownership of things, you start gaining your self-agency at the same time.
Right.
Accepting someone else's boundaries, not taking it personally, but actually understanding that is someone setting a boundary and showing that they want to work on this relationship because they care about you as a person. And communication.
Yeah.
I think without that, we miss all of this. And this communication, this conversation, I think was really great. So I want to say thank you, Sean. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, Richard, for spending time with us tonight, and the listeners. I really appreciate you guys. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
No.
Thank
you so much.
Thanks for being here, you guys.
Thanks for spending time with us today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or follow through the Glass Recovery Podcast so you don't miss future episodes, including next week when we talk about dealing with change once we're sober.